Just the same as like with your child or with your partner or with your business partner, even if you never encounter opportunities where you have to have a tough discussion, you don't build that muscle. You don't learn how to communicate if you don't encounter those situations. So, same thing with a factory. If you're not encountering a situation where something comes out bad and you have to have a tough conversation, you're not building that muscle.
Do you have a brilliant product idea but don't know where to start to get it made? Or are you looking to level up your product but afraid to take it overseas?
If so, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Erin, and we are
The Sourcing Gals.
your trusted guides to everything you need to know about sourcing, manufacturing, and scaling your product overseas. Whether you are just starting out or you've been making your own product for a while, we are here to help women source products overseas without the overwhelm.
In each episode, we'll share insider tips, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories to help you source more effectively, save time, and boost your profits.
Duh!
We know how hard it can be to juggle the ins and outs of product development, but don't worry, we've got your back.
So grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and let's dive into how you can grow your business,
Make more money.
and turn your products into profit. Welcome to
The Sourcing Gals. Now let's get started. High five.
Hi. Tell me this. What if your sourcing agent lived in your browser? Meet Axio. This is Alibaba's AI-powered sourcing engine that understands what you need. It matches you with pre-vetted suppliers, it analyzes trends, it even helps with compliance. If you want to test for a special certification or custom specs, Axio handles that. With the new Axio agent, it automates requests for quotes and follow-ups as well. Even us, the sourcing gals, we have used it to cut sourcing time from weeks to minutes. And with our code, the sourcing gals, your first month is just $1. Then $19.99 per month after that. If you're launching or scaling a product business, this tool changes the game. Try Axio with our code today.
Hey everyone, welcome to this very special episode of The Sourcing Gals. It feels totally weird to do that by myself, but this is a first solo episode because I am in China and Jackie's back in the US holding down the fort. But I came here to work on a project and I want to talk you through that. What kind of prompted us to bring me here to do the project? What the project entailed and how working from China can improve or not improve the project you're working on, and really in what case it works and in what case it's not necessary. So earlier this week, I was standing in a factory looking at swatches and a mock-up sample. And then yesterday I held 3 samples in my hands, variations of all of the mock-ups that we reviewed earlier in the week. It is really about condensing timeline and in turn, I think in the long run, saving costs. It may not seem like it in the beginning, but we'll talk through that in a moment. Everything this week really proximity mattered because we could have done some of these meetings via a video chat, but it's really hard during a video chat to understand perceived value and quality of the good, holding it, feeling the structure or the weight. And both those things were really important for this project. This is the first project for this customer, it has a super condensed timeline, and the quality of the product was really going to be different than what we've done previously for this same customer because this is like a special edition product. So let's get into it. So jumping back into normally on the day-to-day when we are working with samples from overseas factories, we're working via email, we're working via WhatsApp. We are seeing videos, we're seeing mock-ups, and we're chatting via, the typed word, so to speak. And there's some of that that actually is stronger and some of that's not. So a lot of our Asian account representatives, factory counterparts speak really well, or should say type and read very well in English, but speaking may be a little bit more difficult. So sometimes when you come over and talk to someone, It actually is a little bit harder to communicate. But where you make up for that is, they say that picture's worth a thousand words, but here it's like seeing the sample and seeing iterations of the sample are worth, let's say, a billion words. So we're going to start out. I arrived last week on Friday and I hit the ground running. Saturday morning, I went to the factory to look at materials and mock ups. Mock ups, they can be done in like any material. They just did it in materials that they had sitting around. It was really to understand the structure of the bag. We were working on this like little pouch bag. It's for the cosmetic industry. And it helped to understand the structure. So for this one, it's going to come packaged with some beauty products in it. So the sizing of the bag was important to fit the items that it will be holding. And then really we wanted the bag to have structure even when it had the products in it and not feel like too sludgy. So both of those things were really important. And both of those things were really hard for me to understand via a WeChat or a WhatsApp video. So we looked at hardware, we looked at the finishes and the weights and the shape, even something as simple as a snap. The snap's not having the rounded edges, but having like a little bit more of a squared off edge. And the gold not being a super blingy yellow gold, but being like a little bit of a lighter, more champagne gold. Those are all things that definitely resonate easier in real life than on a photo, even. So we're looking at weights, we were looking at structure, we were looking at materials. And what's interesting is that for things that are neutral or even like light blushes or pinks, sometimes it's really incredibly hard to understand color from a photo. Browns can skew yellow or green or gray or red. Browns are really tough. And so we were able to sit with all of the aspects of the bag and look at all the colors together and ensure that if we were choosing something that was a little bit red cast, maybe, that all of the items leaned red so that it felt like a cohesive product in the end. The other thing that really mattered to me was some of the functionality. This is a cosmetic kit, but it turns like into a bag. So we wanted it to look like a bag and function like a bag, but open up like a cosmetic kit. So that means your handle not really being in the way. And so we worked through some of those functionalities with the sample room and with the vendors in real time. And that was really helpful. One of my favorite things about seeing samples in just the mock up form. Actually, the sample that I saw was an orange and white stripe, and the zipper was red, and the leather was black, like nothing matched. But I took a pen and I was able to look at the bag and write on it. It was a little bit tall by about 2 centimeters or like 3/4 of an inch. So, right on the bag with a pen, I drew where I wanted the pattern to be adjusted. Also, the strap was a bit long. So, I was able to just mark exactly on the strap where I wanted it to end to make it the perfect length. And the last thing is that we were able to really hone in on those colors, like I said earlier, choosing the hues of browns and tans that matched. This may not seem huge, but thinking about a cosmetic bag or a bag of any sort, we had the body fabric, we had the trim leather, we had the lining, we had the zipper tape. So the color of the tape that's on either side of those zipper teeth. We also had hardware. So snaps and buckles that needed to match the color of the zipper teeth. And then really small details like stitching. I decided to change the stitching from a brown that would match the leather to a white that would pop and be a little bit more of a kind of summer coastal preppy vibe versus something that was tonal, which kind of disappeared into the bag. The other thing we did was the bottom, the base of the bag. Originally, it had been just in the canvas body fabric, but we decided to make it also in the vegan leather. And so when you flipped it over, it also had that beautiful brown leather and it had that stitching, that white stitching along the bottom of the bag as well. When I arrived in the mock up, the bottom of the bag was seamed into the side, and we decided instead to top it on. And so all of these little changes are things that I would never have been able to make with the timing that we had. So let's move on and talk about timing. Usually, samples take just about a week to make, maybe between 5 and 10 days, depending on the availability of the fabric. So for us, all the fabric was readily available. The suppliers that supplied the faux leather and the canvas and the snaps were all able to just send over a couple yards almost immediately so that we could get going on the sample. In some cases, they might have to actually make that sample yardage to send to you. But in our case, it was available, which was our goal to pick something that was readily available and that we could get very quickly. So after choosing that, we went into the sample room. We rolled out all of the fabric. We looked at it together. It looked great based on our choices. And I was able to give the go ahead. So with my samples that I had drawn on and with this sample yardage we had ordered that came in and was lovely, we said, go, make these samples. So that was last week on Tuesday. And then Saturday, today, I saw those completed samples and they were great. So from last week on Saturday to today on Saturday, I saw mock ups, I saw sample yardage, and I saw finished goods. This whole cycle of events probably would have taken about a month to do in from the US. And maybe it wouldn't have been as good because I wouldn't have gotten my hands on those early mock-ups. It would have been a little bit off, but maybe for timing reasons, we would have felt compelled to go with it. So in this case, we got a little bit of a better product in a shorter period of time. And, cost wise, if you think about it takes maybe between $400 and $500 to ship goods to the United States to review, to ship them in a 3 to 5 day timeline. You can pay a little less and get them in 10 days. At the end of the day, this trip probably only cost about 4 times what would have taken to mail everything. And it took a quarter of the time. So we're actually going to get a project done and get it to production. Whereas before, we probably would have missed the timeline. So it's hard to really put a dollar amount on missed opportunity or the presence of an opportunity, but certainly that mattered to us.
If you're building a product based business and finding yourself second guessing decisions or wishing you had someone to gut check, we want you to know you don't have to do this alone.
On January 1st, we're opening the Sourcing Gals Founders Circle, our private community for product-based founders.
Inside, you'll get monthly Q&A calls with us, access to our templates, scripts, and tools, and most importantly, a community of founders building right alongside you.
It's only $27 a month, or for a limited time, $247 for the year. That's 3 months free. You can find all the details in the show notes. Hope to see you there.
So in between the time, you're probably like, okay, you saw a mock up early in the week, and then on Saturday, you got a finished sample. What was going on in the middle? Now, a couple things. We have this sample running at 3 different factories. And the reason why is because we have to go on these samples. The ones that I got yesterday, we have to move on them. So we have to place an order against them. And I was fearful that if we only put it with one factory and it didn't turn out, we would have missed the opportunity and spent money to come here and it would not have, been beneficial. So I put it with 3 factories. I let the factories know that it was with other factories. Sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't. If I feel like I am already running business with these factories and already giving them POs, I probably won't let them know if maybe I've double sourced or cross sourced one of their items with somebody else. But in this case, this would be my first PO placed with all of these factories. So I wanted to let them know that there was a chance it might not happen because I am also sourcing with other folks. Now, you have to say this in a kind way. I said it in a way that was like, this project is incredibly important to us and our business. And we have to do this because the timeline is so short. And we want to be sure that we're going to knock it out of the park on the first round. Everyone's pretty understanding. You don't you rub anyone's face in it, obviously, but I think it's worth a mention so that if it doesn't come to fruition, they're not like what happened. Okay. So where I saw the first factory on Saturday and then another factory on Monday and then saw some mock-ups on Tuesday. And then I was with the third factory on Wednesday. So I was in between these three factories for the week. There were a couple days that I had some downtime and I'll let you know what I did with that. So in the downtime, I worked on some other projects we had on hand. We have a project coming up that has a unique fabric, and I went to the fabric markets and I looked for ideas for that product. I went to wholesale markets where they have goods that have already been produced that they're selling in the dozens. You can buy like 12, 24, 48. Let's say you had a little boutique and you wanted to buy some stuff for your boutique. This would be a great place to go for like hair clips or headbands or scrunchies or little coin purses, things like that. So I went to that market just to kind of see like what's new, what are people buying, what people buy for their boutiques in Asia is different than America. So it was really enlightening. And, I got a couple fun things to bring home and consider for other clients. And then lastly, just some like shopping in the market, seeing what's out there and what's becoming cool. There were a couple really big standout trends that I saw here that I haven't quite seen in America yet, but I think we're going to see in a really big way by probably end of summer or early fall. And so that was exciting to see. If you want to know what those things were, follow us on Instagram. I'll be sharing it there with some videos of the products. It'll be a lot of fun. And then the last thing I want to talk about is like kind of this misconceptions about China. We get this a lot from customers who feel like China is a place where everything's cheap and gets knocked off and is kind of without heart. And I just want to talk about how uninformed that position is. There is in every country you go to, in every facet of manufacturing, there are going to be factories that just churn and burn, that don't care about their environment, don't care about their people, and offer really cheap shit. And in this case, we are working with factories who are not like that whatsoever. The factory that I was with on Friday, I walked their factory and I was not permitted to take any video, any pictures, because they care so much about the IP of their customers. They don't want it out here on our podcast, on our Instagram. They know that we're on social media. They know that we're using these ideas and passing them to customers. And that would be against like their own values. So it was a really actually like wonderful. I was a little bit disappointed that I couldn't show you guys pictures of the production line. But on the other hand, like I get it. They have some really high end customers. And if I was that customer, I would not be happy to see some podcaster come and take pictures of my product in production before it ever hit the market. So the sophistication and the just consideration for the brands is there when you find the right partner. Also, the speed. We talked about the speed. It's so fast. And, it's not fast because of any sort of like exploitation. It's fast because it's set up to be fast. The factories that we were in have sample rooms. The sample rooms are just like a small little workshop where you have someone who is an expert in like A to Z of product making. They're creating patterns. They're discussing where the sew lines should be. They are talking about if the weight of the fabric is really going to work in the type of product that you are making. Just on Friday, I was talking about how I wanted the handle of the bag to have a little bit more structure rather than be totally flat, like have a little bit of boning on the inside. And they call it the Sifu. Sifu is like the boss or the expert, like the head of the sample room. He ran off. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He had the materials on hand. He sewed it right up. He brought it over. I'm not joking. It was 5 minutes, maybe. Brought it right over and it was like a hit. It was perfect. And then he went and did the kind of edge detailing, which was a paint. It dried. It dried in 30 minutes and I was able to give an approval on that handle. So speed, craftsmanship, and just how collaborative the partners are when you're here in person. It means a lot. We were sitting in sample rooms where the contacts that I talk to and email every day, I saw face to face, sometimes for the first time. And it was just it's like being reunited with a friend. You've talked for years via email. My factory contact who I was with on Monday, I met her in 2018, and this is the first time I met with her in real life. So we had a really fun dinner. We had a lot to talk about. We follow each other on Instagram. We talked about our kids. It was a really wonderful visit and really kind of not only cemented our personal relationship, but the relationship that our companies have with each other as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is in product development. I think there's this misconceived notion that you send out a tech pack, you get a sample, and if it's bad, then the factory is bad or the relationship is bad. And I just want to dispel that. You heard me talk earlier about how from Saturday to Monday to the next Saturday, I saw multiple variations of what we were working on. And it's not because there's any misunderstanding. It's not because the sample room or the factory is not a high quality. It's actually just because what I'm saying and what I think in my mind and how I communicate that to somebody else and what they hear and what they execute on, they're different. And that's life. That's not just sample making. But I want to talk about how revisions are normal. Getting one sample and it being perfect and going to bulk is not normal. When you do this, you have to work in an excess of development. I was talking to a client about this last week, no, the week before last, that if you expect to get one sample and it to be perfect and you can go, then you have to overdevelop by probably 4 times. If you're going to develop 10 samples, maybe 2 will be great the first time. And that's going to cost a lot of money. You're going to have to pay for each one of those samples. And then your factories are going to start understanding what you're doing, and they're going to end up charging you more because of their pain and suffering and time. And so it's possible to do it that way. It just ends up being a little bit more expensive. It ends up being kind of degrading that relationship, that confidence a little bit. Whereas building in enough time to do even just 2 samples, to get one sample, comment on it, and get a second one, that will build communication. It builds trust and it keeps your costs low. I want to also say there that building communication may seem like a long play, or it may seem like something that's not important, but it is actually how you and your factory contact learn how to communicate with each other. Just the same as like with your child or with your partner or with your business partner, even if you never encounter opportunities where you have to have a tough discussion, you don't build that muscle. You don't learn how to communicate if you don't encounter those situations. So, same thing with a factory. If you're not encountering a situation where something comes out bad and you have to have a tough conversation, you're not building that muscle. You're not learning how each other operate and each other's expectations and needs. And that's important. I had a tough discussion with a factory last week, one of my Zoom calls actually, and I wanted to have it while I was here so that I could talk in Zoom while she was in the office, while I was in work time. And I wanted to discuss a situation that was just not good. Some samples that kept turning out kind of poor, even when we were making comments against them, and why that was happening. And toward the end of the conversation, it was about an hour, there was an unlock. We realized that a word I was saying, she was interpreting different. And that was the entire issue. So we worked that out, and now we can go forward with no issues. A lot of people stop there. A lot of people say, this is not good. This factory is not good. I'm going to move on. I'm going to cut ties with them and find a different factory. And guess what? Eventually, you're going to encounter a similar issue with your new factory. So there are times, of course, when a factory and you just like don't align, don't get it, but have those tough conversations first. And those tough conversations are much easier to have face to face and easier to have in person. So that's another facet of why these visits are important. All right. I've talked for a long time. I need to pack up. I'm heading to the airport tomorrow morning. And I just wanted to bring you guys along a little bit on this journey, why I'm here, why it is valuable for product development, and when it can be helpful and when it may not be helpful. And one last thing just on like logistics and costs. A trip like this costs about $5,000 for a week. I did not fly lay flat business. I flew like premium economy, but in the end, that might totally be worth it for you. You come away with a renewed sense of understanding of your product, how it's made. You get to check the market out. You get to build relationships with your factory, and you get to see multiple samples in a week. I think that the value is 100% there. If anyone here who's listening to this is considering visiting a factory, we can definitely talk more logistics like how to use trains or Alipay or all the ins and outs that make it a smooth trip and make it effective. But for today, we're just talking about what I'm here doing. And I hope that this has kind of pulled back the curtain on why trips like this happen and what we were able to accomplish in just a week's time. And that's all. Wow. I talked for quite a long time, which I think we say at the end of every podcast. I certainly missed having Jackie here with me and giving her perspective. But you know what? On our next production trip, she will be here. This was such a quick turnaround time, and I already had a Chinese visa. And so I was able to book and come here within a 2-day period of time. But we are going to get Jackie on the next one. We'll do another podcast from China or from anywhere. Maybe it's Bangladesh, maybe India, maybe South America. Who knows? But thank you so much for joining me today and coming here to this new solo episode of The Sourcing Gals. See you next time.